Hey everyone, it's Alexander, the real Mr. Robinson. Welcome to the channel, and this is my review for Dune Part 1, which is directed by Denis Villeneuve, the director of Sicario, Prisoners, Arrival, Blade Runner 2049, has an all-star cast, and is the third adaptation of the classic 1965 novel from Frank Herbert, Dune. The movie follows Paul Atreides, who's the heir of the House Atreides, who head over to the planet Arrakis to pretty much rule it and control its spice. But they're at war with another house, and soon Paul finds himself to be the equivalent of the Chosen One, because he has visions of a young woman on Arrakis, and her people have been pretty much fighting to try to save the planet, since they are, in fact, the natives. So do any of you out there ever have this experience? There's a movie coming out, everyone's excited for it, people are building it up, some claim that it's going to be the greatest movie ever made. It has so many great things going for it, and so many talented people attached to it, but for some reason, you're just not that interested in it. That was Dune for me. I never read the book, and I've never seen the David Lynch movie, but I am very well aware that Dune's influence is monumental. I mean, Star Wars pulled a lot of influence from Dune, like the desert planet, the concept of a chosen one. So there's a lot that Star Wars owes to Dune. But for some reason, every time I seen the trailer for this movie, I just never got excited. And I don't know why, because Denis Villeneuve has directed two of my favorite movies of the last decade, Arrival and Blade Runner 2049, and it's got a stellar cast. I guess the trailers just didn't really sell me on it, and there was a part of me where I was just actively fighting the hype. Again, I have no idea why, because I figured, you know what, I'm probably coming across as bitter and cynical, but this movie's gonna be good. So I went and saw it, and sorry to say, I didn't like it. Now, I don't have a problem with this movie being part one of a two-part adaptation. Personally, I am a little sick of that trend, and I honestly thought this trend was done after the Hunger Games finale pretty much crashed and burned. But that's not what really bothered me about this movie. The main reason this movie just didn't really work for me is that it's simply style over substance. Now, it's a visually impressive movie. It has some of the best effects that you'll see all year, and I would actually be shocked if this movie did not win Best Visual Effects. They're that good. They blend seamlessly with the practical sets. Just the overall look of the movie is outstanding, from the costumes, production design, the cinematography is incredible. And even though the entire movie takes place on a desert planet, and after a while that scenery gets old, they make it look good, and that's not really a fair criticism considering that it's based off the book. So at the very least, they did make that desert look pretty. It's got a stellar cast, which includes people like Oscar Isaac, Josh Brolin, Dave Bautista, Jason Momoa, Stellan Skarsgård, and for me, the best actor in the entire movie, Rebecca Ferguson. She plays Paul's mother and the wife to Oscar Isaac's character, and she is just fantastic. I felt like most of the movie's emotional beats came from her more than anyone else. Josh Brolin and Jason Momoa are the two actors that probably bring the most personality to the movie, especially Jason Momoa. Sure, he's playing Aquaman again, but he's still really good. He honestly brings more personality to this movie than Timothée Chalamet did. And the reason I didn't initially mention him in that big list of actors is because not only did I think Timothée Chalamet was weak, I actually didn't think he was good at all. When I was watching this movie, the one thing that crossed my mind was that this guy has as much personality as Hayden Christensen did in the prequels. Just so bland, uninteresting, and maybe that's the way the character is written in the book, but I mean, for being the so-called chosen one and the heir of House Atreides, I just didn't buy into him. And I don't blame Timothée Chalamet at all, because we've seen him act. The very same week Dune came out, he was in The French Dispatch, and he was great in that movie, which is a shame I didn't mention him in that original review, but he was fantastic. With this movie, he just seems to have no personality whatsoever. Almost like he's sleepwalking in his role. The only times he ever seems to lighten up is when he's interacting with Jason Momoa and they're acting like buddies. And his weak performance wasn't the only issue I had with this movie. There's a lot of exposition going on throughout this movie that's used to explain what's going on and advance the story, when I just don't think that was entirely necessary. I feel like if this movie was made knowing that its audience was smart enough, then it shouldn't have really done all this exposition. Because when you watch the original Star Wars, that movie doesn't have a whole lot of exposition outside of the opening crawl. Most of that movie, and most of the original trilogy really, lets you explore this world and get to know things firsthand rather than having the characters explain what's going on. And I didn't feel that way for Dune. Again, this could be the fact that I didn't read the book. Maybe all that expositional stuff is in the book, but the movie should be able to stand on its own without having to depend on its source material. And just as a movie, I don't think the exposition really worked. In a way, it kind of reminded me of a Christopher Nolan movie where it didn't have that much personality. It was very dry all around, and you kind of wish that for a science fiction film, it had a little more fun. Again, Jason Momoa is the main actor who brings in a little bit of personality to this movie, and maybe Josh Brolin, while Rebecca Ferguson is more the heart of the story, but I just feel like the overall movie itself didn't have much of a personality. And also, I didn't like the score. I personally have not been a huge fan of Hans Zimmer for the past couple of years. Every once in a while, he'll put out a fantastic score, like with Dunkirk. But with Dune, it didn't really leave that much of an impression on me. And those vocals that you hear during the trailers are in the movie as well. And I felt like those vocals were just a little too on the nose. Okay, yeah, we're in the desert. We don't need those types of vocals to remind us that we're in the desert. We can see that. It just came across as cliche. That's the only part of the score that I flat out hated. Everything else was just kind of underwhelming. And that's honestly the best way to describe Dune for me. It's underwhelming. It was hard for me to get invested in what was going on. It was hard for me to care about Paul as a character. The exposition was a little too much. The movie's too long. I mean, I guess that's not a criticism considering that this is part one of a two-part adaptation, but I felt like there were elements of the story that you could have easily cut out or at least shortened. Again, I'm reviewing this from the perspective of somebody who's never read the book. As a rating, I hate to say it, but I gotta say watch at your own risk. I say that in the most positive manner to where if you do see this, you have to see it in theaters. At the time I'm recording this review, you can't see it in IMAX because Eternals is now in IMAX. But this is not a movie you watch on HBO Max. This is a movie that you go out to the theaters and see, and you try to see it on the biggest screen possible. I acknowledge that I'm in the super minority when it comes to this movie, and anyone that actually loves it, I'm not going to rain on your parade, and you clearly got something out of this movie that I didn't. But for me, the critical reception reminds me very much of Mad Max Fury Road, La La Land, and Zack Snyder's Justice League. Mainly the first two movies, because people claim Mad Max Fury Road is one of the best movies ever made. It's a great action movie, but the plot is non-existent and there's barely any characters to care about. Some people claim La La Land to be the best musical ever made. I'm like, have you seen Mary Poppins, Sound of Music, West Side Story, Singing in the Rain? I could name several musicals that run circles around La La Land. And then I hear people claim that Zack Snyder's Justice League is one of the greatest superhero movies ever made. No, it's not. I mean, it's good, but it's nowhere near among the best. And with Dune, I'm not hearing the same level of, oh, it's the greatest movie ever made, but I just don't really have the same love for it that so many people do. Again, I acknowledge that I'm in the minority on this, and with all that being said, and despite the rating that I gave it, I'm excited for part two, because maybe with part two, I could watch it and then revisit this first movie going, okay, so that in part one leads into this in part two, this makes a whole lot more sense. So I'm willing to give this movie another shot when part two comes around, but right now, just as part one on its own, it was underwhelming. And there you go. That's my very late and very controversial review for Dune. I hope you enjoyed it. But now I want to know what you guys think about this movie. If you've seen it, what did you think? Whatever the case may be, let me know in the comments below. And until next time, this is the real Mr. Robinson telling you there's only one. Hello everyone, I just want to say thank you all for watching my review for Dune Part 1. Make sure you like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell button to get notifications. Don't forget to follow me on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, go check out my Twitch channel, and support me on Patreon. I'll see you guys in the next video, but until then, have a good day and take care of yourselves.